Hello, friends. This is the Netarts Friends Church podcast. We are Jesus people, Kingdom of God people, welcoming, yearning, sharing. And we're glad you're connecting here with us. We'd love to connect in person as well. If you're inclined to support this podcast or for more information, just hop on over to netartsfriends.org. That's netartsfriends.org. Let's jump into today's sermon. Who is my enemy? One of the most truly diabolical and evil schemes is not simply to commit atrocities against humanity or against creation. As evil as that is, there is something worse. One of the most truly diabolical, conniving, and cunning schemes is deceiving humanity so that humanity willfully destroys itself and creation. It's telling humanity stories and creating illusions that convince humans to commit atrocities against other humans and against creation. Rather than simply being the destroyer, it is planting the seeds of self-destruction within humans. It takes a truly cunning and evil puppet master to pull a project like that off. An evil puppet master like this lives by creating a narrative of fear, where the actors may come and go, but the play lives on through the generations. The storyline is always the same. There are big, bad, awful enemies that need destroyed. It is always a story of fear. An evil puppet master like this accomplishes this scheme by creating illusions that cause everyone to misunderstand who their enemy actually is. Who is my enemy? Every enemy is only an illusion. The evil puppet master knows what will cause people to sound the alarm against one another. The evil puppet master knows what it is that everyone fears the most, and they know how to create the illusion of that fear, how to haunt people with that fear until they identify the other as the enemy. The evil puppet master is a genius at creating mascots that elicit fear and hatred. Images and buzzwords that cause us to categorize others as if we now understand them, know their motivations, their intentions, and their story. The evil puppet master knows what might cause you to turn against another human, to become filled with hatred towards them, to begin to wish punishment, vengeance, and suffering upon them while justifying it to yourself. Biblical justice has always been about delivering the oppressed, but the evil puppet master knows how to twist the meaning of justice into punish the oppressor. He knows how to convince you that your perceived enemy is the true oppressor, and they must be punished. He knows how to get you to approve of and even participate in creating suffering for others while telling yourself you are righteous and just. The evil puppet master does not fear the destruction of mascots and puppets. Every enemy is only an illusion. Every puppet is a pawn. They're all disposable. They are doomed for self-destruction. They're a dime a dozen. The evil puppet master is not loyal to anything or to anyone. He will destroy any mascot, any empire, any power that he has built a narrative around in order to save his own skin. It's no loss to lose even the biggest and scariest of mascots or puppets. In fact, the evil puppet master can spin the self-destructive loss of any puppet into a further story that there are big, bad, awful enemies that need destroyed. The actors may come and go, but the play lives on through the generations. The only thing that the evil puppet master fears is that humanity would look up and realize that we have been duped all along about who our enemy actually is. The evil puppet master fears the one who is able to pull him down from his perch, to disarm him, to expose him to humanity, to make a public spectacle of him, to exile him to a place where he can never again cast his illusions and pull the wool over humanity's eyes. For centuries, humans have been convinced that other humans were their enemy. History bears this out. It's with deep sadness and soberness that we admit that even Christians throughout history have approved of and even participated in atrocities against humanity while claiming that they were doing it in the name of Jesus, in the name of morality, in the name of righteousness, in the name of justice. This dynamic doesn't only happen at national levels, political levels. It happens within families. It happens in workplaces. It happens within churches and within communities. And yes, just to be clear, it happens within people. I have sometimes been the one who was duped into thinking that someone other than my enemy was my enemy, and I have allowed that to temporarily cloud my judgment. So, a discussion question. Once you believe that someone is your enemy, how does that cloud your judgment? What is it that you cannot see or access within yourself? So take a few minutes and reflect on that. If you are listening along with someone else, pause and chat about that together. All right. Who is our enemy? This brings us to our gospel story today. We finished our story last week in Luke's gospel with the disciples looking at Jesus. He had just calmed the storm on the Sea of Galilee, and they were saying to one another, "Who is this? He commands even the winds and the water, and they obey him." We are moving from that story to a story where the question shifts subtly. It is no longer, "Who is this?" It is, "Who is our enemy?" So, here's the story. Luke 8:26 through 39. They sailed to the region of the Gerasenes, which is across the lake from Galilee. When Jesus stepped ashore, he was met by a demon-possessed man from the town. For a long time, this man had not worn clothes or lived in a house, but had lived in the tombs. When he saw Jesus, he cried out and fell at his feet, shouting at the top of his voice, "What do you want with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? I beg you, don't torture me." For Jesus had commanded the impure spirit to come out of the man. Many times it had seized him, and though he was chained hand and foot and kept under guard, he had broken his chains and had been driven by the demon into solitary places. Jesus asked him, "What is your name?" "Legion," he replied, because many demons had gone into him. And they begged Jesus repeatedly not to order them to go into the abyss. A large herd of pigs was feeding there on the hillside. Mark's gospel says 2,000 pigs. The demon begged Jesus to let them go into the pigs, and he gave them permission. When the demons came out of the man, they went into the pigs, and the herd rushed down the steep bank into the lake and was drowned. When those tending the pigs saw what had happened, they ran off and reported this in the town and countryside, and the people went out to see what had happened. When they came to Jesus, they found the man from whom the demons had gone out, sitting at Jesus' feet, dressed and in his right mind, and they were afraid. Those who had seen it told the people how the demon-possessed man had been cured. Then all the people of the region of the Gerasenes asked Jesus to leave them, because they were possessed by a great fear. So he got into the boat and left. The man from whom the demons had gone out begged to go with him, but Jesus sent him away, saying, "Return home and tell how much God has done for you." So the man went away and told all over town how much Jesus had done for him. Who are the pigs that you wish could be driven into the sea? Every culture has buzzwords and mascots. If I said something about Jesus arriving in Washington, D.C., and driving all of the elephants into the sea, or driving all of the donkeys into the sea, that would probably mean something to you. It would send a cultural message. But people reading that same story 2,000 years later might not get it. They might say, "What's with all the elephants?" Or "What's with all the donkeys?" And so, I have to tell you about one of the most fear-inducing mascots of the day to Jewish people in Jesus' time. It was the infamous 10th Legion of Rome, Legio X Fretensis. A legion of Roman soldiers was a group of roughly 6,000 soldiers, and this particular group, they were infamous. They were the Roman legion exerting power and making life hard for the Jewish people in our gospel story today, and they had a bloody legacy of warring against the Gauls and against Pompey. They are known for destroying the monastery of Qumran, where the Dead Sea Scrolls were found. They destroyed the temple in the First Jewish-Roman War of 66 through 73 AD. They laid siege to Masada in 71 AD. Guess what their mascot was? It was a pig, a giant boar. One of the most defeating stories that the people of Israel had from their recent history was when Jerusalem was captured and a pig had been sacrificed in the temple in Jerusalem and people were forced to eat it. And this mascot was just one more way of throwing that story in the people of Israel's face. This mascot, the pig, was imprinted on the silver that they traded on their military banners, on their statues, on the arches that they built. Everywhere, pig, pig, pig. And you can see some of the images right here. The boar on the silver coin, the boar on the seal of Legio X. It's no surprise that the Jewish rabbis in their writings likened the Romans to pigs. Guess where the 10th Legion of Rome had their headquarters? In Decapolis. That's right where this story happens. It's the other side of the lake. It's where Jesus brought his disciples. Mark's gospel says that's where they're landing their boat. They're landing in Decapolis. It's the pig side of the lake. It's Gentile territory. Furthermore, Mark's gospel tells us that there were 2,000 pigs in this large herd. You didn't just find a herd of 2,000 pigs randomly in that area of the country. Pigs needed water, they needed grain, they needed a large food source. In first century Palestine, if someone had a few dozen pigs, that would have been a lot. But 2,000, as they say, that would require an army to take care of 2,000 pigs, much less eat 2,000 pigs. Historian R.W. Davis and Trent Voth point out that Roman soldiers throughout the empire got a daily ration of 1 pound of meat a day of bacon, pork. Trent Voth brilliantly calls this entire story deviled ham. So how does this message sound now? To hear the demons say, "We are legion, send us into the pigs." This story in its original context had even more cultural buzzwords. Luke says that the herd rushed down the steep bank, but Luke's words there, herd, can be used to refer to a group of military trainees, and his word rush can be used to describe a marching army. And so you could read it, and the group of military trainees marched down the steep bank into the lake and drowned. Now, FYI, pigs don't march, they scatter if they're afraid, and pigs can swim. You can Google it. They don't just drown, they can swim. So are you starting to get a different picture? If you could have asked the people of Israel, or even Jesus' disciples, who are the pigs that you wish could be driven into the sea? Who is the legion that you wish could be driven into the sea? Most people would have started talking about the Legio X, the 10th Legion of Rome, the military power of Rome. Those were the pigs that they wished could be driven into the sea. They would probably think back to the Exodus story where God destroyed the powers of empire in Egypt. It says in Exodus 15:4, Pharaoh's chariots and his army he has hurled into the sea. And I can imagine Luke's readers reading this story and cheering, like, yeah, go Jesus, destroy their mascot, destroy their pigs, destroy their food supply. Let's go get the rest of the pigs. Let's round up the rest of the legion. But then we're caught up short. Wait a minute. Who chose the pigs as the object for destruction, self-destruction? Who caused the pigs to self-destructively march into the sea and drown? Wait a minute. That wasn't Jesus. That was a different power speaking and acting. Remember what we said at the beginning about the evil puppet master who uses mascots and illusions of fear to cause you to misunderstand who your enemy is so that humanity becomes self-destructive? Every mascot is disposable. The only thing that the puppet master actually fears is the one who's able to pull him down from his perch and disarm him and expose him to humanity, make a public spectacle of him, exile him to a place where he can never again cast his illusions and pull the wool over humanity's eyes. Why is it that when Jesus landed in Decapolis, he didn't have the 10th Roman legion marching down the hillsides to resist him entering their territory, stopping him from declaring a different kingdom than Rome? Why was Jesus met by one vulnerable man? As soon as Jesus set foot on the shore, here was a man completely naked, completely alienated from society, a man overcome by fear and anxiety, fight and flight, living out the most vicious of self-destructive patterns, somehow being held hostage by some kind of a diabolical, demonic power or powers, a man held by an evil puppet master. This evil puppet master didn't want pulled down from his perch. He didn't want pulled down from his place of infecting the entire community with fear, illusions, and stories about enemies. There are big, bad, awful enemies that need destroyed. The evil puppet master didn't want sent into the abyss. He would readily sacrifice his scariest mascot, Legio X, to save his own skin. Send us into the pigs! He would cause them to self-destruct. He had no loyalty. The actors may come and go, but the play lives on through the generations. Now I need to pause here and tell you who actually said that line, because you see there are quotes around it. The person who said that line is Murray Bowen. He's the father of family systems theory. And I want to briefly apply a family systems theory lens to this story and help you see an aspect of this story that's important. So, Murray Bowen, the father of family systems theory, says that when any two people are in a stable relationship with one another, they are able to keep that relationship just between the two of them. But when fear and anxiety increase, they almost inevitably involve a third person, because involving a third person decreases the anxiety in the twosome. And so by spreading it through three relationships, it reduces the tension between the two. And it's a triangle. Murray Bowen says the triangle is the smallest stable relationship system. A two-person system may be stable as long as it is calm, but when anxiety increases, it immediately involves the most vulnerable other person to become a triangle. Now, fear and anxiety within a triangle does not only reside within individuals. Fear and anxiety resides in the space between people. Every relationship network is highly interconnected. Everyone's affecting everyone, and it can be very subtle, but very real. It not only includes words, facial expressions, tone of voice, body posture, nonverbal cues, all of that. And fear and anxiety are transmitted and projected. So Bowen notes what often happens to the third vulnerable person. The process invariably gravitates, he says, towards having two insiders and one outsider. Whoever that outsider is, they're stuck in this tension. They're caught in between pressure. Tension to frame one person as the victim, the other as the victimizer. What often happens is living with the tension and the anxiety causes them to become the one actually exhibiting the symptoms of the anxiety and the fear within the relationship system. So they become the problem, and that's how the tension is temporarily reduced and resolved. They are the people who end up exhibiting the fear and the anxiety. Society might label them the problem people, but the fear and the anxiety doesn't only reside within them. Murray Bowen says it's infecting the entire group. It's infecting the community, the society. And he notes how deeply these triangles become embedded in the emotional circuitry of social networks. He says, if one member of a triangle dies, another person usually replaces him. The actors may come and go, but the play lives on through the generations. There's that quote. Children may act out a conflict that was never resolved between their great-grandparents. In our gospel story, the fear and anxiety that was present within the entire community had absolutely victimized and taken over this one man. But notice that when he was made whole by Jesus, what happened? Notice that the fear didn't immediately leave the entire community. Numerous Bible translations say that the community was possessed by a great fear, that they were possessed and suffering with great dread and terror. The word there, possessed, suneko, is an amplification of the same word that's used to describe the way the demons were also holding the man in the story, Echo and suneko. He was naked, self-destructing, living in the tombs, alienated, and now the community is possessed by this fear, which means to experience great psychological fear or anxiety, to be a prisoner of that fear. So you can see, even within this gospel story, that the evil wasn't only afflicting one person. New Testament scholar Fred Craddock says, a community learns to live with demonic forces, isolating and partially controlling them. This partially successful balance of tolerance and management of the demonic among them also allowed the people to keep attention off their own lives. But now the power of God for good comes to their community and disturbs a way of life they have come to accept. So, a question about the way fear infects and resides below the surface. Here's the discussion question. Have you ever witnessed fear and anxiety residing in the space between people in such a way that even if one person became healthy and whole, the fear and anxiety popped up somewhere else within the social network and the anxious patterns continued? Take a moment and chat about that, reflect on that. So, how is the anxiety within an anxious triangle worked out? Within family systems theory, Murray Bowen calls this detriangling. He says it's when the third person in the triangle becomes healthy, and instead of catching all of the other people's anxiety and fear, they are able to self-differentiate. They're able to stay calm and be a calm, non-anxious presence. They stay in contact with the other two people, basically telling them, I know the two of you can solve this. I know you can work this out. And now the fear and anxiety shifts back to them. They have to face that anxiety and fear and take responsibility. And Bowen says that not only is anxiety catching, contagious, but calm is also catching and contagious. He says detriangling is probably the most important technique in family systems theory. So with this in mind, notice what Jesus said to this man and what went on. So this man who was previously demonized, he is healed, he's liberated by Jesus, and he's in this posture of a learner, a disciple. He's sitting at Jesus' feet, he's dressed, he's in his right mind, and Jesus doesn't let him continue to be isolated from his community. He wants to leave and go with Jesus, but Jesus instead restores him to his community. He tells him to go back and tell his story. He doesn't tell him to go tell the community's story, say what other people want him to say. He doesn't tell him to go back and tell the puppet master's story, that story of fear. He goes back and he tells his story. And notice what happens. It's healing. The sequence of events, the people of the community, first they want Jesus to leave. The guy's restored. The community is possessed by fear. They ask Jesus to leave. Jesus tells the man to stay, to tell his story to the community. But after the man stays with the community, connected to them, telling his story about the Jewish rabbi Jesus, something changes within them. The next time we see this community, this group of people, in Mark chapter 7, they are flocking to Jesus. They are overwhelmed with amazement. They are not possessed by fear. They are overwhelmed with amazement. They're saying, wow, Jesus has done everything well. Fear's no longer possessing them. They want to hear what this Jewish rabbi has to say. So are you beginning to see what Jesus was actually up to in this story? New Testament scholar N.T. Wright says, Jesus is fighting a battle against the enemies of the people of Yahweh, but Rome is not the enemy. It is the Satan and his hordes who are deceiving Israel into thinking that Rome is the real enemy, so that Israel will not notice the reality. Jesus is going into what was thought of as enemy territory, taking on, from the Jewish point of view, the demon of uncleanness and hostile paganism, and defeating the real enemy instead. The evil puppet master has held up thousands of different mascots down through history. The Romans, the Muslims, the Salem witches, in the Inquisition, the Jews, the Nazis, the Japanese, the socialists, the Russians, the Ukrainians, Hamas, Israel, foreign immigrants flooding across the border, Donald Trump and the MAGA crowd, Kamala Harris and the woke crowd, your mean boss, your ex and their family, the school bully, fill in the blank. They are all meant to be fear-inducing mascots. And every mascot is disposable. The actors may come and go, but the play lives on through the generations, and the storyline is always the same. There are big, bad, awful enemies that need destroyed. The Apostle Paul in Ephesians 6:12 says, "We aren't fighting against human enemies, but against principalities and powers, forces of cosmic darkness, and spiritual powers of evil in the heavens." He goes on in Colossians, he says, "Having disarmed the principalities and the powers, Jesus made a public spectacle of them, triumphing over them by the cross." So who's your enemy? How do you keep from getting sucked into this illusion, sucked into this vortex that the evil puppet master creates and convinces you that your enemies are the mascots? How do you keep from becoming infected with the fear that's infecting your family and your community? How do you keep from being pulled into the triangles that are all around you, trying to spread the anxiety and the fear onto you? How do you keep from becoming one more person held hostage by that fear? How do you find the way to be in the presence of your community while sitting at the feet of Jesus, clothed in your right mind? How do you become someone willing to return to your community as a non-anxious presence, willing to tell your story? Once again, we return to the Sermon on the Plain in Luke 6. This is the way of life that Jesus teaches his disciples. Love your enemies. Do good things for people who are mean to you. Pray for good things to happen to people who are mean to you. Don't retaliate. Don't one up and perpetuate hostility. Practice generosity. Give without expecting anything back. Treat others the way you want to be treated. Be kind and merciful. Do not judge. Do not condemn. Forgive. Follow that forgiveness up with more generosity. Practice self-examination. Work on yourself rather than on others. Focus on storing up goodness in your heart. And the Apostle John sums this up simply. This love for enemies. He says, perfect love casts out, and yes, that's exorcism language. It exorcises fear. With that, I want to close with a prayer exercise. We tried this prayer exercise a few weeks ago, and I want to do it again. I think that this is very important for our time. I invite you to close your eyes unless you're driving. Think about a human in your life who the evil puppet master has been trying to convince you is your enemy. Who are the people you've been thinking about throughout this whole talk, and you're like, man, but they are evil. And man, there's so much going on with them that really does make me afraid, and so much that I could say negative about what they're doing. I want you to think of those people and feel what it feels like to pray this authentically and genuinely for them. I invite you to say this in your own mind. Jesus, may this person I'm thinking of find a deeper well-being than they think possible. May their relationships thrive. May their soul be full of joy, deep happiness, and gratitude. May they grow in health, emotional, spiritual, and physical. May they never be alone in suffering. May they be loved, truly and unconditionally loved. May they be surrounded by the peace of Christ. May they know down deep in their guts that in the eyes of their Creator, they are a person of unsurpassable worth. In your name, Jesus. Amen. Thank you for joining us for a Sunday sermon from Netart's Friends Church. We hope you'll join us soon for one of our in-person worship gatherings. For more information, hop on over to netartsfriends.org. God's peace be with you, friends.